Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Now, after months of Nigerians staring at a dark economic future with a litany of excuses about why everything is so depressingly bad, is at least one thing: fuel imports likely to soon be a thing of the past, and the image of people left stranded in long queues at petrol stations a distant memory. Well, for the millions who've been pinning their hopes on the new privately owned Dangote petroleum refinery, perhaps, just perhaps, a milestone is on the verge of being reached. It's still not clear how long people will have to wait to see a drop in prices or the ready availability of petrol, but there appears to be some hope. Meanwhile, the country is still mired in its worst cost of living crisis in a generation. Add to this high inflation and the falling value of the naira, and no one can deny that Nigerians have been hit by the harshest economic winds ever, and more people than ever before have been pushed into poverty. So where lies the sun, or is it all darkness and gloom? Well, that's for more on this. I'm joined now on the line from Port Harcourt by the international economist and global strategist, Derego Williams. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Williams, for joining us. Now, we heard yesterday from the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, that Nigeria is now pumping 1.8 million barrels of crude oil a day. And today, that point was reinforced by the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Heineken Lopobiri. What's your reaction to that? I'm wondering, given that you are in Port Harcourt and in the heart of the oil-producing Niger Delta, whether you've seen any overt or covert signs on the ground to support that announcement.
All right, thanks, Charles. Thank you so much for having me. Firstly, let me congratulate you and Arise News for doing such an incredible job. And also to you personally, Charles. Sorry, I'm having a feedback here.
Okay, it's all right. We can hear you. We can hear you loud and clear. So keep talking while they try to fix the feedback. You're sounding perfectly fine on air.
Oh, okay. All right. So, and thank you also, Charles, for your incredible mastery of the English language. I'm sure it is quite scintillating as ever to listen to you ever so often. And I'm sure that even the average Englishman is jealous of you. Secondly, let me preface this conversation by acknowledging the fact that Nigeria is a great country because it is one of the most populated countries on the continent of Africa with enormous resources. The difficulties we are going through are transient. And I also want to tell my compatriots that it is not President Tinubu that is responsible for the current economic problems. As my former boss would say, you never know who is swimming naked until the pool is drained. Nigeria has been swimming naked for over 50 years. And it's only under Tinubu's watch that the pool finally got drained to expose our nakedness. And of course, the president is doing his best to try to recloak the country through his profound economic reform policies. One that is hinged on the unification of the forex market, and also for removing the subsidy on petroleum. But subsidy issues have to go beyond that, even in the area of electricity and also on gas. What we have seen in the past is that anytime the government is involved in the value chain or the supply chain of a commodity, they tend to create subsidies, on gas, on petrol, on forex. Even when Nigeria Airways was flying, tickets were also subsidized. And whenever that happens, what it does is that it alters the free market pricing mechanism. And once the free market pricing mechanism is altered, it means that investments that ought to come into those sectors are minimized. And that is why eventually the country is underproductive. All right, now on the oil production level currently that they're reporting at 1.8 million barrels per day, that is still, in my view, a drop in the bucket. At the height of Nigeria's oil production back in 2005, the country was doing about 2.7 million barrels per day. Okay, if you were to interpolate that to the current population dynamic, the country ought to be producing about 7.7 million barrels per day. But that in itself is not even enough to cater to our problems, because back then, in 2005, the 2.7 million barrels per day practically did nothing for us. So beyond this, what do we do? Beyond this, what do we do? See, oil is not the panacea for economic development, all right? Not in our own dynamics. Elsewhere, maybe in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates, it works. But for us, it's a different set of dynamics, all right? So what we need to do now is to look at the alternative, which is to increase investments. The country needs to borrow massively to pump into the development of infrastructure.
Right, okay. I want to take this in bits and pieces. I don't mean to interrupt you there. I just want to take this in bite-sized chunks. What would you say is the biggest economic problem that Nigeria has? Is it energy, the lack of adequate electricity supply, something else such as, fuel and diesel costs? What are the things that are impeding economic growth at the moment, would you say?
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Charles, for that question. All right, so basically, the primary objective of any economic system is to produce goods and services and bring them into the marketplace. Goods and services to the marketplace. That's one leg of the equation. And then in that marketplace, you must have what you call the free market pricing mechanism, all right? Such that if the price of Gary, for example, is 500 naira per cup, it is 500 naira per cup. And nobody should try to subdue it, all right, or suppress that price. So that free market pricing mechanism must be in place. Then on the third leg, you must have the factors of production to drive that productivity. And what are these factors of production? It's basic economics. You need land, labor, entrepreneurship, and of course, capital, all right? Now, aside from land, which is God-given, all the other three components are man-made, are supposed to be man-made, and it's based on the human capacity. And what drives human capacity is knowledge, it's education, all right? So when we lack, in the ability to mobilize capital, then we are going to pay the price for it. So the problem is not just energy, it's not just security, it's an aggregation of everything. In fact, it's even part of our social embeddedness, that we do things in a particular way different from everybody else on the planet. So these are the issues, all right? So let's talk about education, all right? Let's talk about energy. Let's talk about transportation systems, roads, bridges, railway systems. Let's talk about irrigation, very important, all right? Let us talk about broadband technology, very important. And all these things must be brought to bear in order for us to mobilize capital. Now, when the government now begins to rely solely on oil, it is not going to get us anywhere. Oil is not the panacea for economic development. Never. It's not going to work. So what the government needs to do is to borrow heavily, but ensure that there's high-level fidelity for those funds that are borrowed in such a way that they are not frittered away and they are targeted to the projects. Okay? So we need to look at security, very critical.
Right.
Because without security,
you've made quite a number
the farmers
of points
cannot.
there.
Yes.
Mr. Williams, you've made a number of points.
Yes.
Just previously, we had the Indian High Commissioner just before you came on, and he was talking to us about how India was able to move from being, you know, a poverty-ravaged, famine-ravaged country in the 1960s to being the 5th biggest economy in the world today, landing, I mean, a spacecraft on the moon and doing things like that. I mean, is Nigeria ever going to really move forward if it doesn't get things like education right? I mean, because with education, you equip your people to be able to develop their own technologies. And as long as all these technologies are being imported into the country, and the country, I mean, the educated class remain almost alienated from that technology. I mean, is Nigeria ever going to really develop in the way that you would like to see it develop?
Well, Charles, you know, as a retired airline pilot, I can tell you that if you're on a flight and you suddenly lost all your navigation equipment, all right? And so you went off course for a long time. Let's say it's a 10-hour journey, all right? And you've been off course for, say, 5 hours, all right? And then suddenly the navigation equipment came in. Now, it will take you time to do proper course correction and get back on track, okay? So for us, because of the backlog or the legacy problems that we've accumulated over the years, it's going to take us time, you know, and we have to be very diligent and be dedicated, you know, to the cause, sincerely, you know, and it's like all hands have to be on deck. Because when you look at it now, Charles, about 80 million Nigerians, right, are without any kind of skill set that is marketable, okay? When people say, oh, the problem is with the North, I tell you that it is not the North. It is in the South, East, West, and South. All of them constitute the problem, all right? And so how do we move from this generation of people that are without skills to the next generation and their offsprings that are going to come in with the same level of incapacity, all right? So it's going to be a very tedious process, but everybody must realize that all hands must be on deck so that we can make this journey and make Nigeria truly the greatest country on the planet, because we have the capacity. Look, Charles, if Nigeria were a company, right, you would say, okay, let's value, you know, this enterprise called Nigeria. You know, you can bring in the best brains to do the valuation for you. And I can assure you that the minimum value that I can ascribe to the country would be something in the region of nothing less than $100 trillion, okay? $100 trillion. So all of that capacity is dormant. So how do we mobilize that? We have to mobilize that by investing properly in education. Look, Charles, when JAM, you know, says that the cutoff point for entry into a technical university or technology university is 100, okay? You know, guess what? If, you know, I'm not a nuclear physicist, right? But if you gave me a multiple choice exam of 100 questions pertaining to nuclear physics, right? I would just simply take A all through and score 25% without knowing anything, 25%. So somebody that scores 25% with JAM, right, practically knows nothing. But you're saying that that person should come, should be qualified to be admitted into a university. And that is not on. So we must, go back and, roll up our sleeves and work hard and take this country forward. Education critical.
Right, and that's a good point that you're making. But let's move the conversation forward, because you once wrote that the current exchange rate of the naira at nearly 2,000 to the dollar was only an intermediate waypoint of a currency on a voyage to at least 3,000 naira by 2027. Because according to you, none of the critical macroeconomic factors would have gestated by 2027. I wonder if you still stand by that position, and if so, whether you might care to sort of expand on it.
Yes, thank you, Charles, for that question. It's a sort of a sorry state, okay? But we have to, really look at the realities on the ground and then own up to the fact that, things are really difficult. Some of the forecasts we are seeing today are reflective of an oil market that would plunge or plummet the price of oil to about $45 per barrel next year, okay? Now, if that happens, Nigeria is going to be in dire straits. When we did that analysis about almost a year ago, all right, this oil price was not part of the consideration, but it has come into the fray, okay? So that 3,000 naira that we're projecting really is, to me, at the minimum, level. And what that is also saying is that, look, Charles, it's not really about the number, okay? Because the exchange rate for the Korean won is about 10,000 won to $1, okay? But, we're talking about stability. So the numbers shouldn't be the issue. It's about the currency stability, the exchange rate stability. So even if we have it at 3,000 naira to $1, if you can stabilize it through productivity, and productivity is going to come through massive investments, not reliance on oil revenue. Oil revenue is not going to get us anywhere. You have to rely on borrowing. This country has the capacity to borrow up to $1 trillion and invest properly. If we don't do that, right, we are actually shortchanging the country, about its capacity or its future development. Therefore, it's important for government to realize that we have to look at all of these things. Rule of law is critical as we go forward, so that when investors come, they shouldn't have any difficulties in investing.
Right. Well, when we started this conversation, you made what appeared to be a speech. I noticed you made some notes, and you were kind of possibly reading from those notes. But you said that you were kind of not blaming the Tinubu government for the problems of Nigeria's economy, but some analysts, including, I believe, yourself, have suggested that in spite of all the loud pronouncements of imminent success by the Tinubu government, Nigeria is on an sort of unmitigated march towards the precipice, because all the economic factors appear to be heading south. It sounds like you have no confidence in the so-called economic course correction measures that the government says will steer Nigeria away from the edge of that cliff.
Well, thank you, Charles, for that question. The reform program is basic, and the president is correct to have embarked on that reform program, okay? That is foundational. It is foundational because, there's an unwritten economic law that says that nobody can subdue the free market pricing mechanism. Nobody can subdue the market forces. And anyone that dares, any society that dares, must pay a hefty price. So we've had this accumulated abuse of the free market pricing mechanism. We've had this accumulated impact of subduing the market forces. And today, we are paying a hefty price. So Tinubu's fundamental cost correction measures of realigning the forex market and also for removal of the subsidy is a fundamental problem. Now, what the president also needs to do is to realize that he must, remain focused on that course. He should not, ever alter, from that particular course he has taken. Then number two, you must now begin to, create the environment for investing. And I'll tell you what, Charles, Nigerians today in their domiciliary account have over $40 billion sitting idle. And then another $10, $15 billion are under their pillowcases. Okay? Now, these are funds that can be attracted into an investment pool. And what the country needs to do is to realize that, there are some kind of funding mechanisms that should apply, whereby at the end of the day, the debt that you are creating are called evergreens because they are never, ever repaid because of the fact that there's a very deep secondary market where the obligations are traded. And so as long as those obligations are being traded, the government does not have to, pay back those, items. And with technology today, blockchain technology today, you can create debt instruments that you can sell across the, planet, even in China.
Okay.
All right? Yes. So once you're able to do that right, you bring in the funds, and then you begin to implement it in these strategic areas, education, infrastructure, security, so that, we can now mobilize the factors of production and then become productive. Our GDP, yeah.
Okay, well, I was going to say, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we're fast running out of time. But I was going to say that it really is interesting talking with you and to get your assessment of this country's direction of travel. Derego Williams is an international economist and a global strategist, and he was talking to me on the line there from Port Harcourt. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Port Harcourt, here in Abuja rather, and Port Harcourt. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.